Joints BUR17006945. Types of joints. Fibrous joints are vital for protection. Their structure allows the brain to be protected as the joints are connected by dense connective tissue. There is no movement at all in a fibrous joint, as they are joined together by bonds of fibrous tissue. The skull is an example of a fibrous joint. It is held together by sutures which make it immovable and able to protect the brain. The joints adapt to the age of the person. For example, during an infant years, their head will be a lot softer and more movable. This is because the body adapts during the mother's childbirth to make the birth easier, as the head is more movable. However, as they get older, the sutures in the skull will become solid to protect the brain. For example, a header in football will be an example of a fibrous joint, as the sutures in the skull stop the brain from becoming damaged by the ball. Cartilaginous joints are also vital for protection. They are joined together by articular cartilage, which are essential to stop friction. They are separated by fibrocartilage. There is a slight movement in these joints. For example, the vertebrae in the back are all cartilaginous joints, each one having slight movement. When all the vertebrae come together, the athlete has much more movement. For example, a diver will need movement in their back in order to get the right technique when diving into the water. The fibrocartilage is also an effective shock absorber, as it is tough, therefore a push in the back won't damage the spine as the impact is absorbed. Without cartilaginous joints, the athlete wouldn't be able to move efficiently and therefore not perform. Synovial joints contain a joint cavity which contains fluid. There are 6 different synovial joints that are all vital for movement in the athlete's body. The bones of the joint are held together by ligaments, and each end of the bone is covered in cartilage, which acts as a shock absorber. This stops the bones from becoming damaged after being hit, for example, hitting their knee on the ground after a foul in football. These joints are freely movable, however, can be restricted by the specific joint, such as the ankle can only perform plantarflexion and dorsiflexion. The synovial joints are made up of 5 different parts. These are the joint capsule, synovial membrane, synovial fluid, ligaments, and articular cartilage. The synovial membrane, which lines the joint capsule, it also houses and produces the synovial fluid. Synovial fluid is a viscous liquid that is used to lubricate the joint. The 4th part is the ligaments, which join the bones together and are vital for them staying in place. Finally, the articular cartilage is found on the ends of the bones. They are bluish colours and stop the bones grinding together. There are 6 different synovial joints that are all vital for movement in the body. These are ball and socket, hinge, pivot, condyloid, saddle, and gliding. The ball and socket allows movement in all directions. The ligaments stop dislocation in the joints, and therefore there is a lot of movement. For example, the shoulder joint is an example of a ball and socket. The ball-shaped part of the bone fits into the cup-like shape of another bone. The shape allows all kinds of movement, as the ball can slide around the cup-like shape of the other bone. They fit efficiently into one another, meaning the ball can slide through the cup. For example, rotation can occur because the ball can move fully around the cup bone with no obstruction. For example, when a tennis player hits the ball from a serve, the shoulder will experience rotation as the ball moves around the caved part of the bone, allowing an efficient hit on the ball. If the shoulder were to be a hinge joint, the athlete wouldn't be able to hit the ball from a higher position, as the hinge joints are a trough shape with a circular bone inside, meaning the bone can't move around freely, making the ball and socket structure efficient for its role. Condyloid joints only allow limited movement. For example, at the wrist, extension, flexion, abduction, adduction, and circumduction are available. The ligaments in these joints stop full rotation to avoid the bones becoming damaged. For example, in table tennis, the wrist will experience movements such as flexion and extension. However, the structure of the bones means it can't move in all directions. The oval shape of one bone fits into the elliptical cavity of another bone. The shape means that the joint can't experience 360 rotation. The oval is only able to move in limited directions as it fits into an elliptical cavity. For example, if a hinge joint was to be in the wrist joint, then the athlete wouldn't be able to experience circumduction, meaning they wouldn't be able to reach various shots. This is because the bones in the hinge joint can only swing open until the bone is straight, whereas the condyloid bone structures are oval, meaning circumduction is available. Hinge joints are cylindrical ends of a bone that is fitted with a trough shape of another bone. For example, the elbow. At this joint, extension and flexion are available. The trough-shaped bone means that the cylindrical shape of the other bone can move side to side along the surface of the trough. This means the elbow can become straight and then return to normal. This structure ensures the elbow can't experience hypermovement and damage the bone. For example, when someone bowls a ball, the elbow becomes straight as the cylindrical bone slides across the trough. The elbow doesn't experience any other movement as the cylindrical bone is only limited to going side to side, not across and moving the elbow joint out of place. Gliding joints are bones that slide over one another. There is only limited movement. The bones are a cuboid shape, meaning only sliding can happen and no rotation. For example, in the ankle during rugby, the athlete will experience eversion and inversion, as the bones slide over one another. This stops the bones breaking if they were to rotate. The eversion and inversion allows the athlete's foot to move inwards and outwards, meaning they can sidestep in rugby and change direction quickly, avoiding their defender. Pivot joints are a rounded bone with a ring shape where another bone fits into the hole. Rotation is a movement allowed here. However, the ring of the other bone stops the full rotation happening. The blocking bone also means flexion and extension can't happen. However, the bone can turn on its axis to allow the rotation. An example of this is in the neck when it only rotates with a controlled and limited amount of movement. The neck is also able to rotate side to side, demonstrating the rotation. For example, this movement allows the athlete to check their shoulder during a hockey match to see if they have an approaching player on them. The ring-shaped bone blocking full rotation ensures the neck bones won't fracture or break, and therefore allow a quick, sharp turning motion in the head as they check their shoulder. Saddle joints only allow restricted movement. This is because the bones are rectangular and cuboid shaped. Both ends of each bone are shaped like saddles, meaning they fit efficiently together. An example of this is in the base of the thumb. Extension, flexion, abduction, adduction, and circumduction are available. For example, when a dart player throws a dart, the thumb joint will be able to move in certain directions that assist the perfect throw. The saddle-shaped bones means the thumb can rotate fully, meaning the saddle-shaped bones means the thumb can't rotate fully, meaning they can throw the dart in a controlled motion. Fibrous versus cartilaginous. Fibrous joints and cartilaginous joints are both vital for protection. However, fibrous joints don't allow any other movement as they are connected by dense connective tissue, whereas cartilaginous joints allow movement due to the many vertebrae in the spine having slight movement. This minimum amount adds up to provide high amounts of movement. They are, however, similar as they both adapt to assist childbirth. The cartilaginous joint in the pubis symphysis allows movement during childbirth, as does the structure in their baby's head becomes softer, meaning it can come out easier. An example of cartilaginous joints in sport are when a diver performs a bending motion during their dive. A fibrous joint wouldn't be efficient here, as a diver needs movement in order to get a high jump and then bend into the diving position. A fibrous joint would not provide this, therefore affect the diver negatively. The cartilaginous joints are able to move, however, are restricted by being completely movable, whereas synovial joints are completely freely movable, but are restricted by their specific structure. Both joints are efficient for shock absorbing due to the cartilage contained in them both, but the synovial joints also contain ligaments which make them very strong. For example, in rugby, if an opponent hits the player in the knee with their boot at a big force, the bones covered in cartilage will protect from any damage as they absorb the shock. Similar to the cartilaginous joints, whom would also perform well in this role due to the fibrocartilage, however, it allows slight movement so it wouldn't be as efficient. Synovial v. fibrous. Fibrous joints and synovial joints are very different. Synovial joints are free-moving and are held together by ligaments, whereas fibrous joints are immovable and held together by sutures. However, both joints are efficient for protection. The fibrous protects the brain and the synovial protects the bones through absorbing the shock. In boxing, the fibrous joints are vital to protect the brain from a punch, which is why they must not move at all. Therefore, if the synovial joints were to be out in this place, then the brain would be at high risk of damage due to the moving ability of the synovial joints. Comparison of synovial joints. Saddle vs. condyloid. In these two joints, in the thumb and wrist, all the same movements are available. For example, they both allow circumduction. This is why both joints would be suitable for both the thumb and the wrist. The saddle-shaped bones create the same moving opportunities as the oval bone with the elliptical cavity of another. For example, when the wrist joint is used in table tennis, it is able to flex and extend to reach different directions. The condyloid bones are adapted to move in this direction, similar to the saddle bones, which are both fitted to allow flexion. Ball and socket versus pivot. Both the pivot joint and ball and socket joints allow rotation, making the ball and socket joint efficient for the neck. However, the pivot joint wouldn't be efficient for the shoulder as it only allows rotation. The shoulder joint needs a full range of movement in order to hit different directed returns in tennis. The ball and socket bones are adapted to this as the ball-shaped bone can rotate around the whole encased bit of the other bone, meaning many directions are available, whereas the pivot joint is stopped by the ring-like shape of one of the other bones, meaning movement is restricted, making it non-efficient for the shoulder. Gliding versus hinge. The hinge joint is in the elbow and only allows extension and flexion, whereas the gliding joint in the hand only allows eversion and inversion, making them non-efficient for one another. For example, inversion and eversion are needed as a cricket player will need to adjust their hand to catch certain balls hit by the opposition. The hinge joint wouldn't allow this movement as the bones can only slide side to side on top of one another and not turn inwards and outwards. Likewise, the gliding bones can't flex and extend as the bones can only slide against one another, not straighten.